You know, it's a curious thing how we take life and turn it into a problem. From the time we learn to walk, we are taught to measure, to map, to manage. We are given lists. This is right, that is wrong, this is success, that is failure. We begin to think of life as a ledger to be balanced, a puzzle to be cracked. And in doing so, we forget the music. We begin to believe that meaning is a kind of prize at the end of a long and treacherous exam. Pass the exam and you will be granted peace. But consider for a moment how peculiar this is. Music is not something you solve. If you treated Beethoven like a crossword puzzle, you would miss the point entirely. You don't listen to a symphony in order to arrive at the last note. You listen because the notes carry you. They move through you, not toward you. And this, I submit, is precisely the attitude with which we should approach life. We have this habit, this charming and obstinate habit of trying to make the unknown knowable. We take the raw, shimmering present and attempt to fit it into the square holes of our expectations. The result is anxiety. We are like sailors clutching at the mast in a storm, but the sea is not the enemy. It is the medium in which we swim. We mistake turbulence for catastrophe. We forget that turbulence is the very texture of life, the grain on which consciousness reads itself. Now, why is it so difficult to accept not knowing? Partly because our culture has elevated knowing into a virtue and ignorance into moral failure. We are rewarded for being decisive, for being certain. Certainty gives us a neatness of identity. Opinions serve as clothes we put on to keep the chill of doubt away. But certainty is often the mask of cowardice. It whispers, I will not be surprised, I will not be moved. And in refusing to be surprised, we also refuse to be alive. To be alive is to be in the flow. And what is flow but the sensation of life moving through you? When you watch a river, it does not plan its course. It follows the contours of the land, and in doing so reveals its own nature. If the water were to ask, am I going the right way? It would no longer be water. The same with the heart. When you begin to treat your desires, your moods, your fears as transient currents rather than fixed possessions, something interesting happens. They cease to be enemies. They are simply the weather. This understanding is not a philosophy to assent to. It is an experience to be realized. You can nod your head all you like at a comfortable article of spiritual belief, but the head is not where the sea is tasted. The taste is in the body, in the loosening of the grip, in the inhalation that is not an attempt to hoard breath, but to allow breath to be. The great paradox, and one of the sweetest jokes life plays on us, is that letting go does not mean losing. The more you stop clutching at sensation, the more fully it can move through you. The more you allow the music, the more music there is. So what practical manner does this take? How does one live as mystery rather than as a problem solver? It begins with attention, not the flinty, acquisitive attention that hunts for answers, but a soft, listening attention. Imagine you are at the shore and the tide is coming in. You can either build a wall of intentions and resolutions to hold the sea back, or you can stand at the edge and feel the water cool your feet. The latter is not passive, it is wise. It recognizes that some things are not to be controlled, but to be engaged with, to dance with. We have all been taught to define ourselves by our achievements, by the jobs we hold, the titles we bear, the narratives we can narrate about who we were and who we will become. But identity is a verb more than a noun. It is an ongoing activity. You do not so much have a self as you enact one. And once you see this, you can play the role lightly. You can treat your story as a costume you wear for a while, with a certain affection and without fatal attachment. The child who plays at being a pirate or a king does not tremble before the costume. He enjoys it. The tragic aspect of adult life is that we forget the playfulness. It is also essential to recognize that opposites are not enemies, but partners. Joy and sorrow are not two separate currencies. They are the same currency seen from different sides. A wave cannot have a crest without a trough. The attempts to manufacture only the crest, to surgically excise every shade of pain, results in a flattened, anemic life. Depth requires shadow. The opening of the heart comes often through its breaking. The capacity to love widely grows where loss has been endured. Strange, isn't it, that our most tender spaces are forged in suffering? Yet this is not masochism. It is the acknowledgement that being alive involves both growth and decay, and that the beauty of a rose is inseparable from the fact that it will fall. So perhaps it is time to stop treating life as a problem and begin treating it as a mystery to be lived. A problem suggests a correct solution. A mystery invites participation. When you drop the pretense of sovereignty, you discover a humility that is not humiliating, but liberating. You begin to see that you do not have to be the engineer of every outcome. You are a participant in a larger dance. The music is older than you and will continue after you. Your duty, if that word is not too coarse for such a tender matter, is simply to listen, to move, and to be present. And if you will indulge one more image, imagine a dancer who, rather than trying to choreograph every move, allows the rhythm to guide the feet. The improvisation is not an abdication of skill. It is the fullest exercise of it. The dancer becomes both instrument and player. In the same way, when you allow life to move through you, you are not passively carried. You are actively participating in the now. There is a curious kind of courage in this, the courage not to possess, but to be possessed by the beauty of existence. So let us begin, not with a new technique, not with an additional doctrine to master, but with a small, immediate experiment. Attend to the breath, not to fix it, but to feel it as movement. Notice a feeling arise and fall like a wave kissing the shore and then retreating. See how it is not your business to be forever in control. See how in the surrender there is an exquisite intelligence. The life you are living is not a problem to be solved. It is a mystery to be tasted, moment by moment. The trouble, you see, begins when we confuse the map for the territory, when we mistake our thoughts about life for life itself. We've built these elaborate systems, moral codes, religions, philosophies, all trying to define what life means. But meaning is not found in the definitions, it's found in the direct experience. A rose does not ask, "What is my purpose?" It simply blooms. A river does not debate which way to flow. It follows the contours of the earth effortlessly. And yet human beings blessed with consciousness seem cursed by analysis. We keep trying to live through our ideas instead of directly. We turn the living mystery into a project, a schedule, a to-do list. And when it refuses to fit neatly into our categories, we panic. But tell me, has the sunrise ever asked for an explanation? Has the wind demanded understanding before it moves? Life doesn't need you to explain it. It asks only that you experience it. But we are obsessed with certainty. We want guarantees. We want to know how the story ends before we dare to begin. And so we sit on the sidelines, trying to plan existence like a chess game, terrified of making the wrong move, not realizing that the very act of waiting is the only mistake. The universe, my dear friend, is not a problem-solving machine. It is a playful improvisation. Think of music. If the goal of music were the final note, every composition would end instantly. No, the purpose of music is the playing, and so the purpose of life is the living. But most of us have forgotten how to play. We work, we worry, we accumulate, we achieve, and all the while we forget the melody. The child remembers. The child doesn't care where the game is heading. The joy is in the running, in the laughter, in the pure unself-conscious being. And perhaps wisdom at its peak is nothing more than a return to that innocence, not the ignorance of youth, but the innocence of someone who has seen the world and learned to trust it anyway. To live this way, you must surrender the fantasy of control, because control is the great illusion, the belief that you can command the ocean by tightening your fist. But you can't. The more you try to seize life, the more it slips through your grasp. Let it go, let it move, let it breathe. Life flows best through open hands. And what extraordinary is this? When you stop forcing life, things begin to happen with an uncanny intelligence. The right people appear, the right opportunities arise, not because you planned them, but because you are no longer standing in the way. You become like a leaf in the current, guided not by fear, but by the rhythm of the whole. Now, don't misunderstand me. Surrender doesn't mean inaction. It doesn't mean sitting on a mountain, waiting for enlightenment to strike like lightning. No, it means participation without tension. It means acting without anxiety about the outcome. When a dancer moves, she doesn't calculate each step. She feels the rhythm. When a musician plays, he doesn't analyze each note. He merges with the sound. That's what living as mystery means. It's to be so deeply attuned to the present that there's no separation between you and what you are doing. And when you live that way, something beautiful happens. Time disappears. The mind, which constantly worries about tomorrow and regrets yesterday, fades into silence. What remains is pure awareness. And in that awareness, you discover that everything you were chasing, peace, happiness, fulfillment, was never somewhere else. It was right here. It was always right here. But our culture teaches us otherwise. It tells us that happiness lies ahead in success, in relationships, in possessions. It's a kind of spiritual consumerism. Buy this belief, adopt this method, follow this path, and someday you'll arrive. But you never do you? Because every there turns into another here, and the cycle begins again. This is the endless treadmill of becoming. And I tell you, it's a trap, because you cannot become what you already are. You can only awaken to it. The oak tree doesn't strive to be an oak tree, it simply grows into its nature. Likewise, enlightenment is not something you achieve, it's something you realize. You don't climb to heaven, you wake up and find you were never apart from it. So let's drop this exhausting project of self-improvement and turn instead to self-discovery. Ask yourself, who am I? When I stop trying to become, you may find that there is no fixed I at all, only a field of awareness in which all things appear and disappear. And that realization can be terrifying at first, because the ego thrives on boundaries. It wants to say, this is me, that is you. But when those walls fall, something astonishing happens. You realize that everything you've been seeking outside yourself, love, freedom, meaning, was never outside at all. You are not in the universe. The universe is in you. The stars that light the night sky are the same elements that dance in your bloodstream. The energy that moves the tides moves your breath. You are not a lonely fragment wandering through space. You are space itself, momentarily aware of its own beauty. And when that awareness dawns, there's no longer any need to solve life. You don't solve a sunrise. You watch it. You let it take your breath away, and you realize that every moment, no matter how ordinary, is a sunrise in disguise. That is what it means to live as mystery. It is to look at a stranger and see yourself. To face uncertainty and feel curiosity instead of fear. To let laughter and sorrow share the same space in your heart, knowing both belong. And the moment you begin to live that way, life ceases to be a burden. It becomes art. Now let's imagine for just a moment that you no longer see yourself as the little figure behind your eyes, trapped in the body, staring out through two holes in your skull, peering at a world that's out there. Instead, imagine that what you truly are is the total field of awareness in which this body arises. That the sound of the wind, the rhythm of your heartbeat, the flicker of light on the wall, all of it is one continuous happening. No observer, no observed, just one event unfolding, expressing, singing. You see, the separation between you and the world is an elegant illusion, a necessary trick of consciousness, so that the universe can look at itself from 1,000 different angles. It's as if infinity wanted to play hide and seek, so it pretended to be you. And once you discover that, life changes entirely. You begin to laugh at the seriousness of it all. You see people rushing to and fro, chasing goals, defending opinions, terrified of death. And you feel this gentle compassion because you know the cosmic joke. There is no one to save, no battle to win, no finish line to cross. All there is this eternal dance, the play of light and shadow, sound and silence, being and becoming. We are not here to reach a conclusion. We are here to participate in the mystery. But participation requires trust. Trust in the rhythm of things. Trust in the intelligence that moves the stars and grows the grass and beats your heart without your command. When you trust that, life begins to feel lighter. You stop clinging. You stop fighting. You begin to move with the current instead of against it. That's what I mean by living the mystery. You see, life is not a riddle to be solved like some crossword puzzle. It's a piece of music to be danced, a poem to be felt. The intellect wants to dissect the rose, to understand its beauty. But the moment you pull off its petals, the fragrance is gone. The mind is a marvelous servant, but a terrible master. It wants to categorize, to control, to measure, but the heart knows another way. The heart doesn't ask why the rain falls. It goes out and dances in it. The heart doesn't analyze the sunset. It stands in awe. And in that awe, there's a sacred kind of understanding that no logic can touch. You might call it wisdom, the wisdom of not knowing. Because in truth, the more deeply you look into life, the less you can say with certainty. Science may tell you what matter does, but not why it dances that way. Psychology may tell you how the mind behaves, but not what the mind is. And religion may give you stories and symbols, but none can capture the infinite in a sentence. To live in the mystery, therefore, is to live without needing answers. It's to bow before the unfathomable and say, yes, I don't understand, and that's beautiful. It's like walking through a forest at dawn, mist curling around the trees, not knowing where the path leads, and yet feeling utterly at home. That is freedom. Not the freedom of choice, but the freedom from the need to choose between good and bad, right and wrong, success and failure. For when you live as the whole, you realize that both sides of every coin are part of the same metal. The wave doesn't fight the trough, the light doesn't condemn the shadow. So why should you resist the parts of yourself you do not yet understand? The mystery includes them all. And when you welcome even your confusion, your sadness, your fear, when you allow them to exist without judgment, they begin to transform. They were never enemies, only unrecognized aspects of the same dance. The shadow merely points to the direction of the sun. And what a relief it is when you stop trying to fix yourself and start exploring yourself instead. To fix is to assume something is broken. But to explore is to recognize that everything you are, the light and the dark, the joy and the pain, are essential notes in your song. If you silence one note, the melody collapses. You see, the river's music includes both the gentle ripples and the roaring falls. And so too does your life. You cannot have growth without decay, or love without loss, or self without surrender. Every petal that blooms must eventually fall. But that falling is not failure, it is fulfillment. Because only through that letting go does the flower make way for new life. And so when we live as mystery, we stop clinging to permanence. We learn to die, not once at the end, but every moment. We die to our expectations, to our attachments, to our need for control. And each death is a doorway. Each ending, a beginning in disguise. To live this way is to move lightly through the world, to laugh easily, to weep freely, to see beauty, even in the cracks. Because when you're no longer trying to hold the world still, you begin to notice its grace. Everything flows, everything shines. You walk down the street and see strangers as stars in disguise, brief flashes of eternity wearing human faces. And you realize that what you call ordinary life is nothing less than a miracle too vast for comprehension. That every breath, every glance, every heartbeat is the universe whispering, I am here, I am this. And in that whisper there's no demand, no instruction, only presence. The kind of presence that silences the mind, softens the heart, and leaves you standing in quiet wonder. So when people ask, what should I do with my life? I tell them, perhaps the better question is, how will you dance with it? For life isn't something to be used, it's something to be shared, like a song sung between lovers, or laughter carried by the wind. You can't possess it, you can only participate, and when you participate fully in joy, in sorrow, in confusion, in clarity, you become the very pulse of the universe itself. You are no longer the observer of the dance. You are the dance. And when that realization truly sinks in, there's nothing left to prove, nothing left to fear. You simply are.
You know, it's a strange thing, this business of trying. From the moment we are little children, we are told, try your best. Teachers tell us that, parents tell us that, even priests and preachers tell us that. Try to be good, try to be better, try to succeed, try to make something of yourself. And so we grow up under this spell, this hypnotic chant of try harder, try more, try again. But have you ever stopped and asked yourself, what is it you're really trying for? What is it that effort is supposed to achieve? Because if you look at it closely, what you'll notice is that most of our trying has nothing to do with life itself. It's all about becoming something we are not. The harder we try to be someone, the more we affirm that we are not that someone already. When you strive to be peaceful, it means you believe you are not peaceful. When you struggle to be spiritual, it means you've decided you are not spiritual enough. And so the trying, you see, secretly keeps alive the very thing you are trying to escape. Now, there's a marvelous trick in nature, a kind of cosmic joke, where the moment you stop pushing so hard, things begin to happen on their own. When you stop trying to be happy, you notice that you're actually fine. When you stop trying to be loved, you realize you already are. And when you stop trying to be someone, life begins to express itself through you quite effortlessly. But of course, the word effortless terrifies us. We've been told that laziness is a sin, that to do nothing is to waste time. And so even when we try to relax, we sit there, teeth clenched, saying to ourselves, all right, I'm going to let go now. You can almost hear the tension of the person trying to be relaxed. It's like a man lifting a heavy weight, saying, I must surrender, I must surrender. You see the absurdity of it. The harder you try to let go, the more you're holding on. And this is why so many people are exhausted, spiritually exhausted, emotionally drained, physically worn out, because they are trying to be something that they already are. You know, there's an old saying from the East, you cannot step into the same river twice. And that's true not just of rivers, but of ourselves. Every moment, life is flowing through you. You're not a fixed object trying to become something else. You're an ongoing movement of energy, a pattern that keeps unfolding. The trouble is, we've been conditioned to believe that if we stop trying, we'll fall apart. That if we let go, everything will collapse. But look around, the birds aren't trying to sing, the flowers aren't trying to bloom, the stars aren't trying to shine. And yet somehow, it all happens. The grass doesn't force itself to grow. The tide doesn't push against the shore, saying, I must reach higher. Trying, you see, is something the human mind invented to defend itself from uncertainty. Because the truth is, we don't know. We don't know what will happen next. And so we try to build a little fortress of control, made of effort, made of tension, made of fear, disguised as determination. And what happens? We wake up one day and we're tired. Tired of improving, tired of fixing, tired of becoming, tired of this endless climb toward a horizon that never seems to arrive. And at that moment, that beautiful, desperate moment, something inside begins to whisper, what if I didn't have to try anymore? Now, don't misunderstand. I'm not saying you shouldn't act. Life is full of action. When the tree grows, it moves, it acts, it expresses. But its movement is not a strain. It's a spontaneous response to life. The same energy that makes your heart beat and your lungs breathe is the energy that moves the stars. You don't tell your heart to keep pumping, do you? It does it by itself. So when you're tired of trying, what you're really tired of is resisting that natural rhythm. You're tired of swimming upstream in a river that never asked you to. You're tired of fighting the current of your own nature. And you see, we humans have made a religion out of resistance. We glorify struggle, we call it ambition, progress, achievement, but no one tells you that ambition can become a prison, progress can become pressure, and achievement can become a constant reminder that you are not yet enough. So what if we dropped this idea, this feverish belief that life is a ladder to climb? What if there's no ladder at all? What if life is a dance, and you've been trying to march to a rhythm that was never meant to be marched to? You can't dance well if you're trying to control every step. You dance by listening, by feeling the rhythm move through you. The music, you see, is already playing. But most people are too busy trying to get to the end of the song. You've noticed this in conversations, haven't you? People aren't really listening. They're waiting for their turn to speak. They're trying to say something profound, something clever, something that will make them feel seen. But the irony is, the most alive moments happen when you stop trying to be interesting and simply become interested. When you stop trying to be spiritual, you find that spirituality is just being. When you stop trying to be enlightened, you find that awareness was already here. The effort obscures the very thing you're seeking. And this is the strange paradox of all human effort. You can't get there by trying, because the moment you try, you've already confirmed that you're not there. It's like saying, I'm going to relax. The very statement is self-contradictory. Relaxation happens when you no longer need to achieve it. But we live in a world that doesn't trust that. We've built systems on striving, education, religion, economics, all designed to reward effort and punish surrender. We measure worth by productivity, value by output. The whole thing is a beautiful machine that runs on human exhaustion. And then we wonder why we feel empty. When you're tired of trying, that emptiness is not failure, it's awakening. It's life whispering, come home. You don't need to run anymore. Think of a fruit ripening on a tree. It doesn't rush. It doesn't say, I must become sweet by Friday. It ripens because it cannot do otherwise. And when the time comes, it falls. Not out of effort, but out of readiness. The universe, my dear friend, has been ripening you in just the same way. Every frustration, every failure, every time you've said, I can't do this anymore, is a moment of ripening, a softening of the hard shell of control. And perhaps you've noticed, the most beautiful moments in your life never came from trying. They came from being caught off guard, a sunset you didn't plan to see, a laugh you didn't force, a kindness you didn't expect. Those are glimpses of what happens when you stop trying and start living. You see, there's a great difference between effort and energy. Effort is what the ego does when it doesn't trust life. Energy is what life does when it trusts itself. When you're in love, truly in love, you don't try to love, you just love. When you're inspired, you don't try to create. You create because something inside you overflows. So when you say, I'm tired of trying, perhaps what you're really saying is, I'm ready to trust. Trust that life knows what it's doing through you. Trust that you don't have to hold the steering wheel of existence. Trust that what you call chaos is simply order too vast for your mind to grasp. The ocean doesn't need your permission to move the tide. The stars don't wait for you to finish your to-do list before they rise. And you, this strange little ripple of consciousness, are not separate from all that. You are that. You are the same force that breathes galaxies into being, now wearing human skin. And that, you see, is the punchline of this cosmic joke. The one who's been trying so hard to live was life itself, pretending to be separate. And the moment you stop trying to be what you already are, you laugh, as all wise men do, at the sheer simplicity of it. You were never behind, you were never off track, you were never failing. You were simply playing the game of becoming until you remembered that being was enough. Now, when one has truly seen the exhaustion of trying, something very quiet begins to happen. It is not a decision you make. It is not even something you can do. It is more like the way dusk falls over a restless city. Slowly, gently, and without permission, a kind of stillness descends. The mind that has been racing to get somewhere begins to stumble and at last sits down. And for the first time, perhaps in many years, there is silence. You see, silence is not the absence of sound. It is the absence of resistance. It is the moment you no longer feel compelled to hold yourself together. And in that silence, something rather beautiful begins to unfold. You start to see that life has been moving perfectly well all along without your constant interference. When you let go of the compulsion to manage every outcome, you begin to notice an intelligence at work that is infinitely wiser than the one in your head. Call it nature, call it Tao, call it God, the name doesn't matter. What matters is that you begin to see how it operates. You begin to see that the same power that makes a seed split open in the darkness of the soil is the power that moves through you when you breathe, when you smile, when you weep. And when you trust that, you find a deep rest, a rest far beyond sleep. Because sleep, you see, is rest for the body, but surrender is rest for the soul. We have been educated to think that if we stop trying, life will fall apart. But the truth is exactly the opposite. When you stop trying, life begins to hold you. When you stop gripping the rope so tightly, you realize the river was carrying you all along. And this is not passivity. This is participation of a higher order. When a musician plays the flute beautifully, they are not forcing the music. They are allowing it. They have practiced, yes, but at the moment of performance, they disappear into the sound. The breath moves through them. The melody plays itself. That is not effort. That is grace. And so it is with life. The art of living is the art of allowing the music of existence to play through you without interference. It is the art of alignment rather than control. When the mind is quiet, the heart moves naturally toward what is right. You don't have to force kindness. It arises. You don't have to force clarity. It appears. You don't have to force purpose. It reveals itself in the very act of living. But this simplicity frightens the modern man. He says, if I do nothing, I will become nothing. Yet have you noticed? The more we do, the more we lose touch with being. We fill our days with effort and our nights with noise, and then wonder why peace feels so far away. When you stop trying, you begin to rediscover what peace actually is. Not the peace of achievement or escape, but the peace that is here, even in the middle of the storm. That peace does not depend on conditions. It is not something you earn. It is your natural state, uncovered when the mind stops struggling to fix what was never broken. Think of a muddy pond. When the water is agitated, you cannot see your reflection. But when it becomes still, everything becomes clear. The clarity was never created, it was always there. The mud was only motion. Now the same is true of your mind. You've been stirring it constantly with your effort, your worry, your self-improvement. The moment you stop stirring, clarity returns. You don't have to make the water still. You only have to stop disturbing it. And this is why so many of the great teachers throughout history have said, be still, not as a command, but as an invitation. Because stillness is not something you impose, it's something you allow. You see, trying is rooted in fear, but allowing is rooted in trust. Fear says, if I don't act, something terrible will happen. Trust says, whatever happens, I will meet it. And life, in its strange wisdom, tends to favor those who trust it. You begin to notice that when you stop forcing outcomes, events start to align in ways that seem almost miraculous. You meet the right person at the right moment. The opportunity you were chasing arrives when you've stopped chasing it. The solution that eluded you while you were anxious appears when you're calm. And you say, well, that was coincidence. But what if coincidence is simply life's way of saying, thank you for getting out of the way? You see, the universe is not against you. It's only against your resistance. When you drop resistance, everything starts to move with you instead of against you. The wind that once felt like an obstacle becomes the breeze that lifts your sail. And as you begin to live this way, you notice a transformation in the smallest details. Even your breath feels different. Even walking becomes effortless. You look at people differently, not as competitors, not as threats, but as mirrors. You realize everyone is struggling in their own way. Everyone is trying so hard to be something, and you can almost laugh because you recognize yourself in them. And you begin to love them for it. Not from pity, but from understanding, because you've seen the futility of trying and the beauty of being. This understanding doesn't make you superior, it makes you simple. You no longer need to prove your worth. You no longer need to convince anyone of your progress. You can live quietly, contentedly, and fully, even in the midst of the world's noise. That is the beginning of true strength. Not the strength to dominate, but the strength to surrender. Not the strength to conquer, but the strength to yield. Because in yielding, you become one with the very power you thought you had to control. And once you have tasted that, once you've seen that there is an intelligence moving through every heartbeat, through every leaf, through every smile and tear, you realize there was never any separate you to begin with. The one who was tired of trying was never real. It was a wave mistaking itself for the ocean. When that illusion fades, something very light remains. You begin to laugh more easily. You take things less seriously. You see that life has always been play, divine play. Serious only when you forget it's a game. And you see that your tiredness was never a sign of failure, but a sign of readiness. You were ready to stop pretending that life needed your constant correction. You were ready to trust the rhythm that has been carrying you since the beginning. So when you're tired of trying, stop. Sit quietly. Listen. You may hear, beneath all your thoughts, a small but steady pulse. That pulse is life itself. It has never abandoned you. It has never required your perfection. It only asks that you let it move as it will. For when you stop trying to live life, you realize life has been living you all along. And in that realization, effort dissolves into ease, fear dissolves into freedom, and the tired soul at last remembers its own timeless rest. There are moments, sometimes quiet, sometimes aching, when one looks over the shoulder of time and wonders what it was all for. You wake up one day and realize that years have passed, and somehow the grand story you thought you were writing seems to have slipped through your fingers. Perhaps you did everything you were told you should do. You worked hard, you stayed busy, you followed the path that others laid before you. Yet still, there is this haunting whisper that asks, was this it? It can be a very strange and lonely feeling, this sense that you have wasted something as sacred as your own life. Because you see, we are all taught that life is something to be used, something to be directed toward a purpose, something that must amount to something in the end. And so we chase after the idea of meaning like a man chasing his own shadow. But the more you run after it, the further it seems to recede. This idea of waste only appears when we measure life by a story we believe it should have followed. You were supposed to be somewhere by now. You were supposed to have done something, become someone, proven something. And yet here you are, standing still, looking at the world, and feeling as if everyone else is moving ahead while you are being quietly left behind. But the strange thing about that feeling is that it never quite tells the truth. Because what if what you call wasting your life is only your life refusing to be wasted on the wrong things? What if your stillness is not failure, but rest? What if the roads you didn't take were simply the ones that were never yours to walk? You see, we live in a world obsessed with progress. Everything around us is designed to convince you that you must constantly be moving towards something, producing something, improving something, achieving something. But in that endless striving, you forget how to be. You forget that the meaning of life is not found at the end of a path, but in the simple act of walking. The oak tree does not rush to grow. The clouds do not hurry across the sky to arrive at a destination. And yet, we are convinced that stillness means stagnation, that silence means absence, that not knowing means failure. The idea that you have wasted your life is built on a comparison. You look at what others have done, what they have achieved, where they are, and then you measure your own existence against their imagined success. But comparison is a trick of the mind. It turns life into a contest, when in truth it was never a race at all. You are not running toward meaning, you are meaning unfolding. Consider this. If a flower were to bloom at midnight, hidden from every eye, would it still be beautiful? Would its fragrance be any less sweet because no one saw it? The flower does not bloom to be seen. It blooms because blooming is its nature. In the same way, your life does not need to be seen, measured, or admired to be worthwhile. You exist because the universe willed it so. And that, by itself, is enough. The feeling that life has been wasted often arises when the story you told yourself about who you were supposed to become begins to fall apart. But every story must dissolve for truth to appear. There comes a moment when the masks grow heavy, when the ambitions no longer excite you, when the old dreams start to feel like clothes that no longer fit. And that moment, though it feels like despair, is actually the beginning of something miraculous. It is the unraveling of illusion. For so long you believed you were on your way to somewhere. But where exactly? You were never truly going anywhere because you were never truly separate from the place you longed to reach. You are already there. The journey was never about arriving. It was about realizing that you had been home all along. Many people come to this realization late in life, sometimes after decades of striving. They wake up one morning, see the lines on their face, the gray in their hair, and they think, what was it all for? They look at the possessions, the status, the roles they played, and none of it feels real anymore. And that can be a terrifying moment, but it can also be the first true breath of freedom you have ever taken. Because when you no longer believe you must become someone else to be worthy, you begin to live. Let me tell you a small story. There was once a monk who spent his entire life searching for enlightenment. He meditated for years, fasted, studied sacred texts, and traveled from teacher to teacher. Yet peace always seemed to elude him. One day, exhausted and old, he gave up. He sat beneath a tree and said to himself, I have wasted my life. But as he sat there, a gentle breeze passed through the leaves, and he noticed the sound of the wind, the sunlight flickering through the branches, the simple stillness of the world. In that moment, he began to laugh, because he realized that all along he had been searching for something that had never been lost. The same is true for you. You cannot waste your life any more than you can waste the sky. You may delay awareness, but the totality of life remains untouched by your choices. Even the mistakes, even the regrets, are part of the great unfolding. Nothing is outside of it. Nothing is wasted. You see, your idea of waste depends on your idea of time. You imagine a line, a past behind you and a future ahead, and you judge where you stand along that line. But time is not a line. It is a dance. The past is not gone. It is alive in you now as memory, as experience, as the invisible current shaping this very moment. The future is not waiting. It is already being born through your thoughts, your breath, your presence. And this moment, this one right now, is eternity disguised as now. So when you say, I have wasted my life, what you are really saying is, I have not noticed that life has always been here, because it has. It never went anywhere. Regret is the mind's way of trying to rewrite a story that was never yours to control. It is an echo of resistance, a refusal to accept the perfection of imperfection. But the moment you stop arguing with your past, the moment you allow every mistake to simply be part of the fabric of what made you, a quiet peace begins to emerge. That peace is not indifference. It is understanding. Perhaps you feel you spent too long in the wrong job, or loved the wrong person, or chased dreams that dissolved into dust. But what if none of that was wrong? What if each step, each heartbreak, each detour was essential in leading you to this very awareness? Life, after all, is not a straight path. It spirals, it loops, it doubles back, it confuses you on purpose so that you may eventually see the futility of trying to control it. And once you see that, a beautiful thing happens. You stop trying to win life. You begin to live it. The great error of modern man is that he measures his worth in productivity. You are not a machine. You are a mystery. You are not meant to function efficiently. You are meant to experience deeply. You are meant to feel the full weight of being alive, the joy, the loss, the uncertainty, the beauty, the grief. Every part of it is sacred. If you could only step back and see your life not as a series of failures or missed opportunities, but as a single piece of art, a painting in progress, you would realize that even the dark strokes are necessary for the light to shine. The contrast is what gives the picture depth. Perhaps you cannot see it now, but someday you will. You will look back and see that nothing was wasted. Every wrong turn led you home. Every heartbreak opened your heart a little wider. Every delay prepared you for what could not be rushed. The truth is that life cannot be wasted, because life is not a possession. You cannot lose what you never owned. You can only forget that it was never yours to control. So, if you feel you have wasted your life, I invite you to look closer. Look at the way the light falls on your hands. Look at the breath moving through your chest. Look at the small, miraculous act of awareness that allows you to even ask this question. This moment, right here, is your life, and it is whole. When you truly see that, something within you softens. The tension of regret begins to dissolve, and in its place comes a deep, unshakable peace. Not the peace of escape, but the peace of recognition. Because the truth is, you were never off track. There is no track. There is only this infinite unfolding, and you are part of it, now and forever. That is where healing begins. That is where the illusion of waste ends. When you begin to sense that perhaps nothing was wasted, the mind doesn't easily surrender its habit of measuring. It will try to find a new way to evaluate, a quieter scale upon which to weigh the worth of your days. It might whisper, "All right, perhaps I didn't waste my life, but surely I should be further along by now." You see, even when you stop running, the mind still wants a finish line. But there isn't one. The idea of a finish line is born from the illusion that life is a journey from ignorance to enlightenment, from brokenness to wholeness, from lostness to foundness. But there was never such a line to cross. You were never incomplete. You were never missing anything. What you call growth, what you call progress, is simply the unfolding recognition of what has always been true. Yet the human being as it is, craves story. It needs to feel that it is going somewhere. That need gives us hope in dark hours, but it also creates a subtle prison. For as long as you believe there is somewhere you must arrive, you cannot rest here. You are always just a little bit away from home. So much of our suffering comes not from the past itself, but from our attempts to rewrite it. We imagine the alternate lives we could have lived, the choices we should have made, the people we might have been if only the cards had fallen differently. But these imagined lives are ghosts. They shimmer just beyond the reach of what's real. And every time you compare your actual life to those ghosts, you dishonor the sacredness of what actually is. You were never meant to be the best version of yourself. You were meant to be the only version of yourself. The perfection you seek is not in some ideal self-image, it's in the depth of the one that already lives and breathes within you. The truth is that the feeling of having wasted your life is an invitation, not a condemnation. It is a quiet knocking from the soul, asking to be seen, asking you to stop chasing, to stop proving, to stop trying so hard to be something. The exhaustion that follows years of striving is not evidence of failure. It is the body and spirit calling you home. And coming home to yourself can feel strange at first, almost unsettling, because the person you built in your mind, the one who was supposed to be accomplished, admired, certain, and strong, begins to crumble. What remains is someone far simpler, softer, more real, someone who does not need to pretend. There is a tenderness in that breaking, like the moment you realize the wave has always been the ocean. The separation was only imagined. And with that realization comes a strange, liberating humility. You begin to see that even your mistakes were not really yours. They were movements of the universe through the particular form you call me. Now, imagine standing on the shore of your own life. Behind you, the waves of memory crash and dissolve. Before you, the horizon stretches endlessly. You could spend your whole life staring backward, watching the ripples of what has been, or you could simply turn and face the open sea. Both choices are available, neither is wrong. But one keeps you bound to what has passed. The other invites you into the mystery that has always been waiting. This moment right now is not the sum of your past, nor the promise of your future. It is life in its purest form, unadorned, unmeasured, and utterly free. The trouble is that we rarely allow it to be enough. We clutter the present with demands for meaning, for validation, for proof that it matters. But meaning, my friend, is not something you give to life. It is what life gives to you when you stop asking it to explain itself. Look at the simple act of breathing. You inhale, and without effort, the universe enters you. You exhale, and you give yourself back to it. That rhythm has been happening your entire life, unnoticed, uncelebrated, perfectly balanced. You do not ask each breath what purpose it serves. You simply breathe. And yet, each breath sustains the miracle of your being. That is how life works. Meaning emerges not from what you do to it, but from what you allow it to show you. When you loosen your grip on the idea that your life must justify itself, something beautiful happens. The ordinary begins to shimmer. You notice the way sunlight falls on your table, the sound of distant laughter, the quiet pulse of your own heartbeat. And you realize, perhaps for the first time, that this unremarkable, unplanned, unspectacular moment is the essence of living. The modern world, however, does not reward this awareness. It worships noise. It values ambition over stillness, productivity over presence, attention over understanding. You are constantly being pulled away from yourself, told that you should be somewhere else, doing something else, becoming someone else. But the truth is that every time you abandon the present to chase a future, you deepen the illusion of waste. You create a gap where none exists. This is why so many people grow restless, even when they appear successful, because deep down, the soul cannot be satisfied with applause. It only longs for truth. And truth, unlike success, cannot be achieved. It can only be seen. When you begin to live with this seeing, your relationship to time begins to change. You stop asking, how much time do I have left? And start realizing that you are time. You are the eternal now, unfolding as this moment, this breath, this heartbeat. Life is not moving through you. You are life moving. The past, then, is not a weight to carry. It is a teacher. The mistakes you think ruined, you were actually sculpting you. The losses you grieve were making space for something new to arise. You thought you were being broken, you were being rearranged. You see, the universe wastes nothing. Not a leaf that falls, not a tear that drops, not a single heartbeat. Everything is used, everything transformed. You are part of that alchemy. So how could you have wasted your life when life itself wastes nothing? Sometimes the path seems meaningless only because you're standing too close to it. Like a painting, its beauty can only be seen when you take a few steps back. You must allow the years to settle, to merge, to reveal their hidden symmetry. Only then do you begin to see the pattern. Only then does the chaos make sense. And as you begin to see that pattern, gratitude quietly replaces regret. You realize that the very moments you despised, the loneliness, the failure, the confusion, were the ones that softened your heart. They broke the shell of who you thought you should be so that something vast and tender could shine through. So, you see, you did not waste your life. You were preparing to live it. And this living has nothing to do with success or legacy. It is about seeing the sacred in the simple, the way water moves, the way your hands age, the way a small kindness lingers long after it's given. These things, though small, are the pulse of eternity. But you must learn to stay with the moment, to stay with yourself, to stay with life even when it offers no grand answers. Because when you stay, you begin to notice that the feeling of emptiness was never emptiness at all, it was spaciousness. It was room for you to finally arrive. Now, some will ask, but what about purpose? Don't we all need one? And yes, in a way, purpose gives us direction, but direction is not the same as destination. Purpose is not something you find, It is something you express through being. The tree does not need a purpose to grow. Its growing is its purpose. The bird does not need a reason to sing. Its singing is its being. And so it is with you. Perhaps your greatest purpose is not to achieve anything at all, but to embody awareness so fully that life can experience itself through you. That may not sound grand, but it is divine. If you can see that even one day of your life, one seemingly wasted, uneventful, ordinary day was actually filled with this quiet divine presence, then the idea of waste collapses. Because what you were calling wasted time was actually eternity playing dress-up as delay. And if you can understand that, not just intellectually but inwardly, then a great peace will find you. Not the peace of resignation, but the peace of realization. The peace of knowing that you have never been outside of life's embrace. Everything that has ever happened, every failure, every detour, every regret was part of the unfolding of this awareness. It could not have been otherwise. When you truly see that, the ache of I have wasted my life begins to dissolve into a quiet smile, because you realize that the story you were mourning was never real to begin with. It was only a dream of who you thought you should have been. And awakening, after all, is nothing more than realizing that the dreamer was never separate from the dream. There comes a moment, often quietly, when you begin to understand that your life does not need to be different in order to be whole. It is a subtle shift, almost imperceptible at first. You stop asking, "What should I be doing?" and instead begin to listen. You start to feel that life, all along, has been whispering to you through everything you once ignored, through failure, through silence, through longing. It was never absent. You were simply too busy trying to edit the story to hear its voice. When this understanding dawns, it's not a flash of enlightenment, but more like the gradual clearing of fog. The trees of your existence, once obscured by regret and expectation, slowly come into view. You begin to see how perfectly imperfect it all was, how each stumble carved a kind of wisdom into your bones, how each disappointment softened your heart, and how even your confusion was guiding you toward clarity. This is the paradox of awakening. You find what you were seeking not by acquiring, but by relinquishing. The meaning you searched for begins to reveal itself when you stop demanding that life prove its worth. You realize that the search itself was never the problem. It was your assumption that meaning was missing that caused the ache. The feeling of having wasted your life was not the truth. It was the veil that covered it. And as that veil begins to fall, a new kind of stillness appears, not the stillness of emptiness, but the stillness of presence. The kind that exists between two heartbeats, in the quiet before you speak, in the way your chest rises without your asking. You notice that life doesn't need your permission to continue. It breathes you, it moves you, it carries you forward, regardless of your stories about it. You see, what most people call awakening is not the gaining of something new, but the gentle loss of what was never real. It's like waking from a long dream in which you spent years trying to find the meaning of the dream itself, only to realize that you were always safe in your bed. The dream was beautiful, tragic, complex, and rich, but it was never separate from the one who dreamt it. So too with life. You were never separate from the totality of it. Even in your loneliest, darkest hours, you were still held by the same intelligence that turns the planets and opens the flowers. You were never outside of that harmony, only asleep to it. To awaken, then, is not to rise above life, but to sink deeper into it, to see the extraordinary hiding within the ordinary, to realize that enlightenment was never a mountaintop, but the ground beneath your feet. You might look back now on all the years you thought were lost, and see that they were not lost at all. They were preparing you to see. They were the soil in which understanding could finally take root. Every regret was compost for wisdom. Every mistake was a seed of awareness waiting for the right season to bloom. And when that season arrives, you begin to move differently. Not because you found some grand new purpose, but because you are no longer fighting the rhythm of existence. Your actions become effortless, not because you've stopped caring, but because you finally trust the unfolding. You realize that your life was never something to manage, it was something to experience. The illusion of waste begins to dissolve because you no longer measure time in achievements, but in presence. You begin to see that 10 minutes of genuine awareness is worth more than 10 years of unconscious striving. When this recognition takes hold, even your past pain begins to glow with a strange light. You see that what once felt unbearable was, in fact, the breaking of the shell around your being. It was how life made space for itself within you, and you begin to thank the very moments that once made you curse your existence. You bow to the storm because you see now that it wasn't against you, it was refining you. And then something even deeper happens. You begin to laugh. Not out of mockery or defiance, but from the sheer relief of seeing how unnecessary all the struggle was. You realize that life had never required your control. It only needed your attention. You had been running through open fields with a blindfold on, searching for the way out, unaware that there were no walls. You may recall the times you prayed for clarity, for purpose, for a sign, and perhaps you now see that those prayers were answered not in words, but in silence. Not through instruction, but through revelation, because clarity does not come from adding more answers. It comes from letting go of all the questions that were never yours to carry. There's an old saying that the truth sets you free, but first it makes you uncomfortable. And that discomfort, that deep unease of not knowing what to do with your life, was the beginning of your freedom. It stripped you of false certainty, of borrowed dreams, of identities that were never truly yours. It left you naked before life itself. And that nakedness, that vulnerability, is the doorway to peace. Because when you stand without pretense, without the armor of who you think you should be, life finally meets you as you are. And that meeting is love. You begin to see that love was never something to find or to deserve. It was the quiet awareness that remained after everything else fell away. It is the gentle hum behind all experience, the soft current that carries every joy and every sorrow. When you touch that current, even briefly, you realize that nothing has ever truly been lost. For how can anything be lost in a universe that recycles itself infinitely? How can a life be wasted when each breath, each tear, each moment of longing becomes part of the great turning? You are not a fragment of the cosmos. You are the cosmos, looking at itself through the eyes of this particular human form.
Just to be alive. It is so plain and so obvious and so simple. Yet everybody rushes around in a great panic as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. Have you ever noticed that suffering is not so much in the pain itself, but in the way we cling to it, resist it, and try to escape from it? It's curious, isn't it? The moment you resist a thing, you magnify it. The moment you push against a thought, you give it strength. And so much of what we call suffering isn't in the rain that falls upon us, but in the way we curse the storm. Now, I'm not suggesting that life is free of difficulty. Far from it. Life has always been a dance of opposites. Pain and pleasure, gain and loss, birth and death, they are as inseparable as the front and the back of a coin. But here is the trick. You see, suffering is not the same as pain. Pain is simply what is. The sting of loss, the ache of the body, the tears of parting, these are natural as the tides. But suffering is the story we weave around it. It is the why me. It is the clinging, the holding on, the desperate attempt to control what was never in our control. There is an old saying in Zen, let go or be dragged. And this is precisely the matter at hand. When you stop clutching, when you let the river flow, you find that the water carries you. But when you stiffen, when you insist on paddling against the current, you exhaust yourself. And then, of course, you call that exhaustion suffering. Now imagine this for a moment. Suppose you are sitting in a concert hall, listening to the most marvelous symphony. The violins rise, the horns call, the drums thunder, and then there are those soft silences between notes. If you tried to cling to one particular note, one particular moment, you would miss the music entirely. And yet that is what so many of us do with life. We clutch to the past, we resist the present, and we demand that the future turn out just so. And in this struggle, we suffer. Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. Isn't that delightful? You stir up the pond, and then you panic, wondering why you cannot see. But if you would only stop meddling, if you would let the water settle on its own, it becomes clear again. This is the essence of ending suffering. To stop trying to force clarity, to stop grasping for control, to let life be. And yet, here comes the paradox. The very moment you try to let go, you will find yourself grasping at letting go. You will say, I must stop suffering, I must drop it, I must let it go. And suddenly, suffering is right back in the room, laughing at you. So, what do? You don't do. You notice, you watch. You become aware of this game you are playing. And in that very awareness, a kind of miracle happens. The grasping begins to loosen on its own. This is why I often say, man suffers only because he takes seriously what the gods made for fun. Life is a game, a play, a cosmic hide and seek. You are it, pretending not to be it. You are the universe playing at being a person. And the moment you recognize that this whole drama isn't meant to be taken with such deadly seriousness, you begin to laugh at your suffering. And what happens when you laugh? You loosen, you breathe, you live. Think of a child. A child falls, scrapes its knee, and within moments they are up again, laughing, running. The pain is there, yes, but it has not yet solidified into suffering. Why? Because the child has not learned to weave long stories about it. They haven't yet learned to cling. But we as adults become very good at storytelling. We carry our wounds like treasures, retelling them, protecting them, building identities around them. And in this endless narration, we suffer far more than the original wound ever required. So let me tell you a story. One you may have heard before, but it bears repeating. There was once a Chinese farmer. One day, his horse ran away, and the neighbors came and said, "Oh, that's too bad." And the farmer simply replied, "Maybe." The next day, the horse returned, bringing with it 7 wild horses, and the neighbors came again and said, "Why, how wonderful!" And the farmer said, "Maybe." The day after, his son tried to ride one of the wild horses, and he was thrown off, breaking his leg. The neighbors rushed in, "Oh, that's terrible." And again the farmer said, "Maybe." The very next day, conscription officers came, looking for young men to draft into the army. But because the son had a broken leg, they passed him by. And the neighbors cried, "How fortunate!" And the farmer, as always, replied, "Maybe." Now, the point of this story is not about being clever or detached. It's about seeing that life is endlessly unfolding, and our judgments of good and bad, fortunate and unfortunate, are terribly short-sighted. When you see this, you begin to loosen your grip on things. You stop suffering over each twist of the plot, because you realize you are not meant to judge the story, you are meant to experience it. Man is a little bit afraid. He wonders what will happen next. But that is precisely the adventure. The attempt to escape suffering is often the very root of it. You fear the unknown, you fear loss, you fear death. But all of these are part of the adventure. The trick, you see, is not to get rid of the storm, but to learn to dance in the rain, not to abolish the silence, but to hear the music within it, not to conquer death, but to realize that death is what makes life so exquisitely alive. And so, if you wish to stop suffering now, don't begin with the attempt to rearrange life. Begin with the way you see it. Look at the river, look at the sky, look at your own thoughts, rising and falling like clouds, and see they were never under your control anyway. When you allow them to flow, you discover a strange thing. Suffering evaporates, and in its place there is a kind of deep, wordless peace. It is not the peace of having solved everything, but the peace of no longer needing to. The more a thing tends to be permanent, the more it tends to be lifeless. Suffering comes from our desperate attempt to make the impermanent permanent. We want the joy without the loss, the life without the death, the gain without the risk. But this is to want a one-sided coin, and a one-sided coin does not exist. When you see this, when you truly see it, you stop fighting the rhythm of life, and in that moment suffering dissolves. So perhaps the invitation is not to escape suffering, but to see through it, to recognize it as a trick of the mind, a tightening where loosening is possible. And in this recognition, right here, right now, you are free. So we have this feeling of being a lonely little me, inside a bag of skin, looking out at a world that is foreign and often threatening. We feel that we came into this world. But did you? Or did you come out of it? Like an apple comes out of an apple tree. Have you noticed this peculiar illusion we carry? The sense that we are strangers in the universe, accidental visitors, isolated egos inside these fragile shells of flesh. We imagine ourselves tossed into a world that does not belong to us, that is indifferent or hostile. And because of this illusion, we feel lonely. We feel afraid. We feel the weight of being a separate self, adrift in a vast, uncaring cosmos. But pause for a moment. Ask yourself honestly, did you really come into this world? Or did you come out of it? Just as a leaf comes out of a branch, just as the wave rises out of the sea, the universe has been unfolding for billions of years. And here you are, a blossoming, an expression, a ripple in its eternal dance. You are not a visitor. You are the happening itself. Consider the wave. A wave curls upon the ocean surface. It rises, takes form, gathers strength, and if it could think, it might say, look at me, I am a wave, I am important, separate, special. But the wave also fears. It sees its own end approaching as it tumbles toward the shore. It trembles at the crash, thinking it will vanish forever, and so it suffers. But what the wave forgets, what we forget, is that it is never separate from the ocean. Its water is the ocean's water. Its motion is the ocean's motion. The crash upon the shore is not the end of the wave, but a transformation. It returns to the sea, just as it always was the sea. You are that wave. You may call yourself by a name, John or Jane, but your true identity is oceanic. You are the universe itself, playing at being a temporary ripple. And when you see this, fear dissolves. Loneliness fades, because you realize you cannot fall out of the ocean. You cannot be lost. You are the ocean, forever folding into new forms. Now let's deepen this. The universe is not merely ocean, but a great play of opposites. Light and dark, sound and silence, life and death. We live in a system of polarity. The crest of the wave cannot exist without the trough. The heartbeat itself, systole and diastole, contraction and expansion. If the heart stopped alternating, you would not be alive. Yet what do? We try to cling to one side and reject the other. We worship the light but curse the darkness. We chase pleasure but resist pain. We want to live but we fear death. And here is the trick. You cannot have one without the other. It's like trying to play a game of chess with only white pieces, or trying to listen to music with only sound and no silence. The opposites define one another. Without the background of night, the stars would not shine. Without silence, music would be meaningless. Without death, life would lose its urgency, its beauty. But suffering arises when we forget this is a game, when we treat one side as an enemy to be conquered, rather than a partner in the dance. The yin-yang symbol, you see, is not static. It's always turning, always flowing. The black contains the seed of white, and the white contains the seed of black. They chase one another like lovers, like dancers. The universe is not at war with itself. It is in love with itself. It is playing, it is dancing. And you are one of its graceful movements. Now let's take another metaphor. Imagine life as a grand theater. The curtain rises, the actors step onto the stage, and the play begins. To be a good actor, you must believe in your role. If you are playing the tragic hero, you must weep real tears. If you are playing the clown, you must laugh with all your heart. But the great actor never forgets. This is a role. The tears are real, yet they are also play. When the curtain falls, the actor steps off stage, removes the costume, and goes home. Now here is the human predicament. We have forgotten we are actors. We are stuck on the stage, utterly convinced the play is reality itself. We take our role as John or Mary, with such seriousness, such gravity, that we suffer as if the play were eternal. But what happens when you remember, when you see that the role is temporary, that the curtain will fall? You do not stop acting. In fact, you act even better, because you can give yourself fully to the role, knowing it is not the whole of you. You are not just the actor, you are the audience, watching the play unfold. You are the playwright, weaving the story. You are the stage itself, upon which the drama appears. And when you realize this, the tragedy loses its sting, the comedy sparkles, and even the sorrows of life become part of the magnificent performance. But perhaps the deepest illusion of all is the sense of separation. This feeling of being a lonely little me, trapped in a bag of skin, peering out at a world that is other. Science will tell you quite correctly that your body is made of stardust, that the iron in your blood was forged in the heart of stars that exploded billions of years ago, that the breath you inhale right now was exhaled by trees, and the breath you exhale is food for them. You are not separate from the environment. You are the environment. You don't live in the universe. You are the universe, living as this particular form for a little while. The illusion of being separate is the root of fear, and thus the root of suffering. Because if you believe you are only this fragile ego, you must constantly defend it, protect it, cling to it, and of course it feels terrifying to lose it. But when you see through the illusion, when you realize you are the ocean, the wave, the actor, the stage, the whole cosmic drama, then death itself loses its teeth. Because how can the universe lose itself? It is only changing costume, only shifting masks, only moving from one dance to another. Let me share with you one final image. The Hindus say the universe is a game of hide and seek. God, or Brahman, hides from himself by becoming us, by becoming the world of forms, by pretending to be you and forgetting. Why? Because there is no fun in playing a game where you already know the ending. So the self hides from itself, takes on the disguise of you, and pretends to be lost. And the whole adventure of life is the thrill of seeking. But sooner or later, the game reaches its turning point. The mask slips, the curtain is lifted, and you remember, it was me all along. I was the seeker and the sought, the hider and the finder, the player and the game. And then you laugh, because you realize suffering was never more than forgetting the playful nature of it all. You are the aperture through which the universe is looking at itself and exploring itself. And when you know this, not as an idea, but as a lived reality, life transforms. The fear of death loosens. The grip of loneliness fades. The seriousness of suffering dissolves. Because you remember, you are not merely in the cosmos. You are the cosmos. And this whole drama, with its joys and sorrows, is your play. So how does one stop suffering now? The ego's first instinct is to find a method, a technique, a new thing to do, to try even harder to control the game. But that is like a person trapped in quicksand, struggling. It only sinks them deeper. The way is not to grasp, but to let go. We human beings are funny creatures. When faced with the challenge of suffering, our first thought is always, what should I do? We want a prescription, a technique, a map. We want some clever method that will finally fix it all. But do you see the trick here? The very one who is suffering, the grasping, anxious self, is the one trying to end suffering. It's like a dog chasing its own tail, or like a man in quicksand who thrashes and flails, only to sink deeper with every effort. The harder you try to be free, the more tightly you bind yourself. Because the very act of trying is rooted in resistance, and resistance is the seed of suffering. This is why control never quite works. You say to yourself, I must let go, I must relax, I must trust, and already you are clutching at relaxation, grasping at trust, forcing yourself to let go. It's absurd, isn't it? And yet, this is the human predicament. We try to control the uncontrollable. We try to clutch the river with our hands. And then we wonder why we come up empty. Letting go is not something you do. It is what happens when you see that there is nothing to hold on to. It's like opening your hand and realizing it was empty all along. It is that we are constantly labeling events as good or bad, fortunate or unfortunate, based on a tiny sliver of perspective. But the truth is we do not know. We cannot know. The story is still unfolding. Our endless judgments, our compulsive labeling, they are the very roots of anxiety. We live in constant tension, afraid of what may come, desperate to hold on to what we call good, terrified of what we call bad. But if we could live like the farmer, with that soft smile of maybe, suffering would dissolve like morning mist. So then, what is the alternative? If not control, if not judgment, what is left? Attention. Pure, unfiltered, childlike attention. Instead of trying to change what is, try simply to look at it. Feel the anxiety in your chest. Don't call it bad. Don't try to fix it. Just feel it as it is. Listen to the sound of the rain on the roof. Don't call it pleasant. Don't call it unpleasant. Just listen. Look at the light filtering through the trees. Don't say, how beautiful. Don't say, how ordinary. Just look. And when you do this, something miraculous happens. The world, which had grown flat and gray, suddenly becomes alive again. Everything shimmers with mystery, as if seen for the first time. You become like a child, and for a child, everything is gee whiz. The most ordinary pebble is a jewel. The most common insect is a dragon. The whole world is vibrant, alive, radiant. Now, I must warn you to live this way feels like living without a net, because the ego desperately wants guarantees. It wants security, certainty, a safety rope to cling to. But life offers no such thing, and that, my friends, is its beauty. The tree does not ask for a guarantee of spring. It simply blossoms. The bird does not demand a contract with the sky. It simply spreads its wings and flies. Living without a net is to realize you don't actually have to let go, because there is nothing to hold on to. There never was. You see, all along, you have been like a man clutching at empty air, imagining it was a rope. And when you finally look, you laugh because there is nothing to release. You are already free. This is the wisdom of unknowing. We are so desperate to know, to pin down, to fix, to explain. But what if we could rest in the vastness of not knowing? What if we could meet each moment without the burden of labels, without the need for certainty? Then life would not be a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. The river flows, and you flow with it. The wind blows, and you bend with it. The stars burn, and you burn with them. There is no plan to follow, no secret key to find. There is only this moment, this breath, this dance. And when you see this, you discover a peace deeper than answers. The peace of not needing to know, the peace of simply being. And here comes the final joke of it all. The very thing you have been searching for, freedom, peace, the end of suffering, was never hiding. It was here all along. It's like looking for your own head. You can twist and turn, peer into every mirror, ask every teacher, but you will never see it directly, because it is what you are looking from. In the same way, you are the very freedom you seek. You are the very peace you long for. You are it. Always, already here. And the moment you stop searching, the moment you stop touching, you see it like a joke that was waiting all along. And then perhaps you laugh. The real you is not a puppet which life pushes around. The real deep down you is the whole universe. And when you realize this, that there is no rope to grasp, no net to fall into, no separate self to protect, you stop struggling, you stop suffering, and you live. Not tomorrow, not when you figured it all out, but now. Always now. So here we are, my friends, at the final turn of this little journey together. We began with a knot, the knot of suffering, the sense that you are a lonely little creature, cast adrift in a vast and hostile universe. And perhaps along the way you've noticed that knot beginning to loosen. Not by force, not by pulling at it, but simply by seeing it for what it is, an illusion. You see, all along, the suffering was not in life itself, but in the way we held on to it. The way we tried to freeze the dance into a still photograph. The way we insisted on being the permanent guest in an impermanent party. And life, of course, refuses. Life moves, it dances, it breathes. And so our suffering was the friction between our demand for solidity and the universe's endless fluidity. Now, let us tie the threads together. We began with separation, a skin-encapsulated ego, looking out through the eyes as if through tiny windows, fearing the world outside. We discovered that this little self, this lonely I, is no more than a mask, a role in a play, and behind the mask Why, behind the mask is the entire theater, the stage, the lights, the script, the orchestra, the audience. All of it is you playing hide and seek with itself. And what a marvelous trick it is to hide from yourself so thoroughly that you can forget your true nature, only to rediscover it with a rush of laughter and tears. For what is enlightenment but a cosmic game of peekaboo? You hid, and now you see. And so, let me remind you of something very important. Life is not a journey with some grand prize at the end. It is a symphony. You don't play the symphony to get to the end of it. No one listens to Beethoven's Ninth and says, "Oh, I can't wait for the final note." That would be absurd. No, you listen for the play of notes, the rise and fall, the silence between the sounds. Life is precisely like that. It is a song. And you are invited to sing along, not to rush to the final chord. The meaning, you see, is not waiting at the finish line. The meaning is now, in the laughing child, in the sound of rain against the window, in the pulse of your own breath. The tragedy of human suffering is that we forget the music and try to turn it into a race. We strain to arrive, all the while missing the very thing we came for, the dancing of the notes. And this is why, you see, the masters, the sages, the poets, they laugh. They laugh not because they mock life, but because they finally got the joke. They realized that there was nothing to get. Now, think for a moment of a dancer. A dancer does not dance to arrive at a particular spot on the floor. If they did, the quickest way would be to walk directly there. No, the dancer dances because the movement itself is the delight. So too with the universe. It does not spin galaxies into being because it needs them to arrive somewhere. It spins because spinning is its joy. You are not here to accomplish some divine checklist. You are here because the cosmos could not resist the artistry of making a you. You are its pirouette, its laughter, its brushstroke of color. But remember this, the dance always includes its opposite. The spin requires the stillness. The music requires the silence. The wave requires the trough. So don't imagine that to live in harmony means to avoid sorrow, or to escape death, or to outrun the shadow. To live is to embrace the shadow as the partner of the light, to hold both hands in the dance. Suffering only arises when we insist on clinging to one hand and rejecting the other. Think once more of the wave. The wave rises, curls, and crashes, and all the while it trembles, saying, "I must not end. I must hold myself together." But the truth is, the wave never ends. Its water was the ocean all along. When it falls, it simply returns to itself. And you, dear listener, are precisely the same. You are not something apart from this grand ocean of being. You are the ocean waving. And when you fall, you do not end, you return. So breathe. And in that breath, realize it is not you breathing. It is the cosmos breathing through you. And so, perhaps you wonder, what am I to do now? And the marvelous answer is, nothing in particular. Or rather, everything. There is no prescribed action, no secret key, no final step. The great relief of awakening is that life no longer needs to be conquered. You don't need to force it into meaning. It is meaning already. Just as a flower does not bloom with an agenda, you do not need one either. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a mystery to be lived. Try this. Tomorrow morning, as you step outside, don't name anything you see. Don't call it tree, don't call it bird, don't call it sky. Just look, just listen. Let the universe wash over you, without the filter of labels. You will find it is alive, shimmering miraculous, because you have stopped trying to make it fit into the tight little boxes of thought. So let me invite you now, the next time anxiety rises, see if you can notice it not as an enemy, but as a ripple in the dance. The next time sorrow comes, see if you can cradle it gently, like a violin note in the symphony. And the next time joy visits, welcome it, but don't cling to it. Let it pass too, for everything is part of the rhythm. Remember, you are not merely listening to the music, you are the music. Let us end, then, with this. You are a function of what the whole universe is doing. In the same way, a wave is a function of what the whole ocean is doing. You are not a puppet dangling on strings, nor a stranger lost in a foreign land. You are the land, the strings, the puppeteer, the play, the laughter, the tears. So when you suffer, remember, it is the universe stretching itself into form, into contrast, into dance. And when you let go, you realize that you were never separate at all. So go now, not with heavy commandments, but with curiosity. Look out the window. See the sky, the leaves, the people passing by. Hear the hum of life around you. Don't name it. Don't judge it. Just let it sing to you. For in the end, there is no end. Only the eternal music, the endless dance of energy. And in that knowing, suffering dissolves. Right here. Right now. You know, I've been asked countless times by people who've had what they call a spiritual awakening, why do I feel so unmotivated? Why does nothing seem to matter anymore? I used to be ambitious. I used to want things. I used to have goals and dreams, and now nothing. And they say this with a kind of concern, as if something has gone terribly wrong. As if the awakening itself was a mistake, a cosmic error that needs to be corrected. But let me tell you something that might surprise you. What you're experiencing isn't a problem at all. It's actually the most natural thing in the world. You see, what we call motivation in the ordinary sense is really just a sophisticated form of running away. It's escape. When you were motivated before, what were you really motivated by? Fear. Fear of not being enough. Fear of death. Fear of meaninglessness. Fear of being nobody. Going nowhere. Amounting to nothing. Think about it carefully. All that striving, all that ambition, all those goals you set for yourself, they were all based on a fundamental assumption. The assumption that you were insufficient as you are, that you needed to become something other than what you are, that life needed to be fixed, improved, gotten somewhere with. You were operating under the illusion that you were a separate individual who needed to make their mark on the world, who needed to justify their existence, who needed to prove their worth. But then something happened. You woke up, and in that awakening, you saw through the game. You realized, perhaps suddenly, or perhaps gradually, that the whole thing was a magnificent hoax. Not a malicious hoax, mind you, but a cosmic game of hide and seek. You discovered that you are not, in fact, a separate fragment of consciousness locked inside a bag of skin, desperately trying to survive in a hostile universe. You realize that you are the universe itself, playing at being you. Now, when this realization dawns, even partially, what happens to all those motivations you had before? They collapse. They have to collapse because they were built on sand. They were built on a false premise, the premise of separation, of lack, of incompleteness. And once you see that the premise is false, the entire structure that was built upon it becomes, well, rather absurd, doesn't it? Imagine you're watching a movie and you're completely absorbed in it. The hero is in danger and you're on the edge of your seat, heart pounding, palms sweating. You're motivated to see him escape, to see him triumph. But then someone turns on the lights and you suddenly remember, oh yes, it's just a movie. It's just actors on a screen. Nobody is actually in danger. Now, can you return to that same level of motivation? Can you care as intensely as you did before? Of course not. You've seen through it. This is what has happened to you. You've had the lights turned on, so to speak, and now you're sitting there wondering why you can't get back into the movie. Why you can't summon the same intensity of concern and ambition you once had. And my question to you is, why would you want to? You see, there's a common misunderstanding about spiritual awakening. People think it's supposed to make you into some kind of super person, more successful, more motivated, more capable. They think enlightenment means you'll be better at the game of life. But that's not what awakening is about at all. Awakening means seeing that life isn't a game you need to win. It's a dance you're invited to participate in, or not, as you choose. Let me put it another way. Before awakening, you were like someone who believed they needed to make waves in the ocean. You were splashing about frantically, trying to create the biggest splash, trying to make your mark on the water. But after awakening, you realize you are the ocean. The waves are already happening. They don't need your anxiety to propel them forward. They move by themselves, naturally, effortlessly. This is what the Taoists call Wu Wei, action without action, or effortless doing. It's not that you become passive or lazy. Rather, you stop forcing things. You stop pushing the river. You allow life to flow through you rather than constantly trying to manipulate it to your advantage. Now, here's where it gets interesting. You see, motivation, as we commonly understand it, is tied up with desire, and desire is tied up with the feeling of lack. You desire what you don't have. You're motivated to pursue what you believe will complete you, fulfill you, make you whole. But awakening reveals that you're already whole. You're already complete. There's nothing lacking, nothing that needs to be added to you to make you acceptable or worthwhile. This realization can be profoundly destabilizing, because your entire life up until this point has been organized around the pursuit of fulfillment. Your career, your relationships, your hobbies, your ambitions, all of it was geared toward filling what you perceived as a fundamental emptiness inside yourself. And now, suddenly, you realize there is no emptiness to fill. Or rather, the emptiness itself is fullness. The void is plenum. So naturally, you feel unmotivated. All your previous motivations were attempts to escape from yourself, to become something other than what you are. But now that you've glimpsed your true nature, that particular game loses its appeal. It's like trying to convince someone who's discovered they're already a millionaire to keep working desperately for pennies. Why would they? What would be the point? But, and this is crucial, this doesn't mean you do nothing. It doesn't mean you lie in bed all day staring at the ceiling. What it means is that your actions are no longer driven by fear and lack. They arise spontaneously, naturally, from your being, rather than from your desperate doing. Think of a tree. Is a tree motivated to grow? Does it have goals and ambitions? Does it wake up in the morning and set intentions for how many leaves it's going to produce that day? Of course not. It simply grows. It's its nature to grow. And in the same way, when you're no longer blocked by the false sense of being a separate ego that needs to constantly justify its existence, you simply do what's natural to you. Not because you should, not because it will get you somewhere, but because it's an expression of what you are. This is the great paradox that so many people stumble over. They awaken and expect to feel more motivated than ever, more clear about their purpose, more driven to achieve great things. Instead, they feel empty, directionless, unmotivated, and they panic, thinking something has gone wrong, but nothing has gone wrong. What's happened is that the false motivation, the fear-based, ego-driven motivation, has been revealed for what it is. And in its absence, there's a space, a silence, a stillness. Most people find this silence terrifying. They immediately try to fill it up again with new goals, new ambitions, new spiritual pursuits. They turn awakening itself into another achievement to pursue, another identity to construct. Now, I'm not just John or Jane, I'm awakened John, enlightened Jane, but this is just the ego wearing different clothes. It's still the same game of separation and striving, just dressed up in spiritual language. The real question is, can you tolerate the emptiness? Can you sit with the lack of motivation without trying to fix it, without trying to generate artificial enthusiasm for things that no longer genuinely interest you? Can you be nobody going nowhere and be completely at peace with that? This is where the real work begins. And I use the word work loosely because it's not work in the usual sense. It's more like allowing yourself to be without purpose, allowing yourself to exist without justification, allowing life to move through you without your constant interference and management. You see, what most people don't realize is that the universe is not static. It's not a dead thing that needs to be pushed and prodded into action. It's alive, dynamic, constantly creating itself. And you are not separate from this creative process. You are this creative process. When you stop trying to control everything, when you stop forcing your personal will onto reality, something remarkable happens. The larger intelligence of life itself begins to express through you. But this requires trust. Enormous trust. You have to trust that life knows what it's doing, that the universe is not going to let you fall through the cracks just because you're not micromanaging every detail of your existence. This is perhaps the hardest thing for the Western mind to accept, because we've been trained from birth to believe that we have to make things happen, that nothing will get done unless we personally see to it. Eastern philosophy has a different perspective. In Taoism, there's this wonderful idea that the universe is self-governing, that it operates by spontaneous harmony without any need for central control or planning. A tree doesn't need a supervisor to tell it how to grow. A bird doesn't need a manual on how to build a nest. And in the same way, you don't need your anxious ego to tell you how to live. Life already knows how to live itself through you. Now, I can hear the objection already, but Alan, if I don't motivate myself, I'll just become lazy. I'll accomplish nothing. I'll waste my life. This objection comes from the assumption that human beings are fundamentally lazy and need to be whipped into action. But is this really true? Look at children before they're conditioned by society. Are they unmotivated? On the contrary, they're bursting with energy and curiosity. They don't need to be motivated to play, to explore, to create. It's their nature. What happens is that this natural spontaneity gets crushed by education, by socialization, by the constant message that you need to be productive, useful, successful. You need to prove your worth. You need to earn your place in the world. And so you develop this artificial motivation system, this internal slave driver that's constantly pushing you, criticizing you, never allowing you to simply be. Spiritual awakening dismantles this internal slave driver. And yes, when it goes, you feel unmotivated, but only unmotivated to participate in that particular game of self-torture. What emerges in its place, if you're patient, is something much more natural and authentic. Not the frantic energy of someone running away from their fear of death and meaninglessness, but the calm, steady energy of someone who's at home in themselves, who's at peace with existence. Let me share something with you. When I was younger, I was tremendously ambitious. I wanted to make a name for myself, to be recognized, to be somebody important. I threw myself into my studies, into my work, into my writing, and there was a certain energy to it, yes, but it was the energy of desperation. I was running, trying to outpace my own sense of inadequacy. Then, through my study of Eastern philosophy and my own inner work, something shifted. The urgency fell away. And for a time, I felt exactly what you're feeling now, unmotivated, directionless, wondering what the point was. But I sat with it. I didn't try to fix it or escape from it. And gradually, I discovered that action still happened. Words still came. Work still got done. But it wasn't coming from that desperate, anxious place anymore. It was coming from, well, it's hard to describe. From silence, perhaps. From emptiness. From the simple joy of doing the thing for its own sake, not for what it might achieve. This is what the Zen masters mean when they talk about chopping wood, carrying water. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The actions look the same from the outside, but the internal quality is completely different. Before awakening, you chop wood because you should, because it needs to be done, because you're trying to be a good person or achieve some goal. After awakening, you chop wood because you're chopping wood. That's all. No hidden agenda, no ulterior motive, just the pure act itself. And here's the beautiful thing. When you act from this place of spontaneous naturalness rather than forced motivation, your actions tend to be much more effective. They're not confused by all the psychological baggage, all the fear and desire and anxiety. They're clean, direct, appropriate to the situation. It's like the difference between muddy water and clear water. Both are water, but one allows you to see clearly, and the other doesn't. So what do you do with this lack of motivation you're experiencing? Nothing. You do nothing with it. You let it be. You stop trying to fix yourself, to improve yourself, to motivate yourself. You allow this phase to unfold in its own time. Because what's really happening is that you're being reorganized at a fundamental level. The old software is being uninstalled, so to speak, and new software is being written. But this process can't be rushed. It has its own timing, its own rhythm. In the meantime, be gentle with yourself. Don't compare yourself to who you were before, or to who you think you should be. Don't try to force yourself back into old patterns that no longer fit. Instead, be curious. Observe what's happening without judgment. Notice what naturally attracts your attention, what makes you feel alive, what makes you laugh or wonder or feel deeply. You might find that your interests have completely changed. Things that once seemed tremendously important might now seem trivial, and things you never paid attention to before might suddenly captivate you. This is natural. You're not the same person you were before awakening. You can't expect to want the same things or be motivated by the same goals. There's a wonderful story from the Zen tradition about a master who, after his enlightenment, was asked what he did. He said, "When I'm hungry, I eat. When I'm tired, I sleep." His questioner was puzzled. "But doesn't everyone do that?" The master replied, "No. When most people eat, they're thinking about 1,000 other things. When they sleep, they're worrying about tomorrow. But when I eat, I just eat. When I sleep, I just sleep. This is the quality of life that emerges after the false motivation falls away. Not a life of high achievement or constant productivity, necessarily, but a life of presence, of wholeness, of being fully here for whatever is happening right now. And paradoxically, this often leads to a kind of productivity that far exceeds what forced motivation ever achieved, because it's not scattered and conflicted. It's unified, focused, natural, but whether it leads to great productivity or not is beside the point. The point is that you're no longer living from a place of lack and fear. You're living from a place of sufficiency and peace. And from that place, whatever unfolds is exactly what needs to unfold. So don't worry about your lack of motivation. Don't try to whip yourself back into shape. Don't feel guilty for not having goals and ambitions. Instead, rest in the recognition that brought you to this point in the first place. The recognition that you are already whole, already complete, already home. Everything else will take care of itself. The universe has been managing quite well for billions of years without your anxious interference. It will continue to manage, and you are not separate from that management. You are how the universe is managing things right here, right now, in this particular location. Trust that. Trust yourself. Trust life. And in that trust, you might just discover
it begins quietly, almost imperceptibly, like a soft drift of shadow at the edge of light. A person who has always seen themselves as kind, honest, and good starts to make small compromises. Not out of malice, but out of necessity. A harmless lie here, a silent hesitation there. They tell themselves, "This isn't who I am. This is just what must be done." And in that moment, a seed is planted not of evil, but of self-deception. No one wakes up one morning and decides to become cruel. The transformation never happens in a single act. It unfolds through countless moments when the truth of one's heart is exchanged for the comfort of being right. You see, the mind has a strange talent for justifying itself. It will twist, bend, and reshape reality until it can still look in the mirror and say, "I am good." The descent begins the moment a person starts believing that goodness is something they can possess, rather than something they must continually rediscover. For when you claim to be good, you also create its opposite, someone else who must be bad. The moment you divide the world into us and them, the game has already begun. The darkness does not enter as hatred, but as certainty. The truth is, we become what we fear whenever we lose sight of our own shadow. Every human being carries within them both the saint and the serpent. But most people spend their lives denying this. They cling to the idea that only others could be cruel, only others could be unjust, only others could fall. And in that denial, The shadow grows stronger, unseen and unacknowledged, until one day it acts on its own. History, time and again, has shown this. Not through monsters who were born that way, but through ordinary people who stopped questioning themselves. A person begins to follow orders they disagree with because it feels easier than conflict. They remain silent while someone else suffers, convincing themselves it is not their place to intervene. Slowly, the conscience adapts. The voice that once shouted now whispers, and in the quiet, they begin to call obedience virtue. It is not that these people become evil. It is that they lose the capacity to see. Awareness collapses under the weight of justification. Once you convince yourself that your actions are for the greater good, almost anything can be done without guilt. Cruelty, when wrapped in purpose, can masquerade as righteousness. The human mind loves order. It wants to believe that if it follows rules, obeys systems, and respects authority, it will remain safe. But safety has always been a mirage. When a person stops thinking for themselves, when they surrender their inner compass to someone else's map, they are no longer alive in the full sense. They have become a fragment of someone else's idea. And yet, you can't blame them entirely. Most people are not cruel because they enjoy it. They are cruel because they believe they must be. Under enough pressure, fear, or belonging, the line between right and wrong begins to blur. When your survival, status, or comfort depends on silence, silence begins to sound like morality. The mind says, I had no choice. But there is always a choice, it's just that some are more painful than others. The moment you avoid pain at all costs, you also avoid truth. Because truth is rarely comfortable, and goodness is rarely easy. Look closely, and you will see that corruption begins not in grand betrayals, but in tiny moments of self-abandonment. You tell yourself, I'll speak up next time. I'll do what's right when the stakes are higher. But the soul doesn't erode in one collapse, it erodes in quiet increments. A man becomes dishonest the day he starts believing that honesty must wait for a better time. There is another force at work, subtler, but far more dangerous, the need to belong. Human beings will do almost anything to avoid feeling isolated, and so they conform. They agree to things they do not believe in. They laugh at cruelty to avoid being outcast. They obey the unspoken rules of the tribe, even when those rules betray their heart. Because belonging feels safer than conscience. But the cost of belonging, when bought at the expense of awareness, is the slow disintegration of the self. This is why some of the darkest acts in history were not done by villains, but by people who simply wanted to fit in. They called it loyalty, duty, or patriotism, words that sound noble, but can hide deep fear. They forgot that morality is not obedience to authority. It is obedience to truth. When the crowd moves in one direction, the temptation to follow is overwhelming. The human mind, desperate not to stand alone, convinces itself that the majority must be right. It takes great courage to question what everyone else accepts, to refuse the comfort of belonging for the discomfort of awareness. But awareness is the only soil in which integrity can grow. You see, we often think of evil as a deliberate act, a conscious choice to harm. But most evil arises from unconsciousness. It grows wherever people stop noticing what they're doing or why. It creeps in through habit, through convenience, through the dulling of sensitivity. That is how the good lose their way, not through malice, but through mechanical living. The tragedy is not that people fall, but that they fall while believing they are standing upright. The most dangerous illusion is righteousness, because it blinds you to your own shadow. When you believe you are unquestionably good, you stop examining your motives. You stop listening to others. You start defending your identity instead of discovering truth. And so, slowly, the person who once helped others begins to justify harm. They say, it's for their own good. The one who once valued honesty learns to deceive themselves. The one who once stood for compassion begins to believe that cruelty is necessary. And all the while, they continue to see themselves as good. This is the quiet tragedy of human nature, that the very desire to be good can lead to blindness. Because when you cling too tightly to one side of yourself, you create the very darkness you hope to escape. You separate the world into pure and impure, righteous and wicked, and in doing so, you build a prison for your own awareness. Every human being is capable of this. You and I are no exception. The potential for cruelty, deceit, and self-deception exists in all of us, but so does the potential for awareness, compassion, and truth. The difference lies not in what we are, but in how awake we are to ourselves. So perhaps the real question isn't, how do good people become bad? But rather, when do they stop being aware of who they are? Because when awareness fades, anything becomes possible, and not always for the better. If you look deeply enough, you will see that the struggle between good and evil is not a battle between people, but a conflict within consciousness itself. Every person is born with both the impulse to create and the impulse to destroy. The difference between the two is not in the heart, but in the level of awareness guiding it. When awareness sleeps, goodness becomes mechanical. It turns into habit, into performance, into self-image. And when goodness becomes unconscious, it easily transforms into its opposite. What we call evil is often simply goodness without light, action without reflection. It is the mind acting without seeing. And this blindness, this absence of awareness, is far more dangerous than malice, because the one who knows he is cruel may still awaken, but the one who believes he is righteous will never question his own hand. So how does one remain awake in a world that constantly tempts us to sleep? How does one live without becoming what one fears? It begins with remembering that no one is entirely one thing. You cannot divide yourself into pure and impure, as though light and shadow were separate entities. They are two faces of the same being. To deny the shadow is to give it power. To look at it clearly, to admit, I too am capable of harm, is to take its power away. This is the first safeguard, awareness of your own potential for darkness. When you know that you can be cruel, you also know when cruelty begins to rise within you. You can see it before it acts, before it speaks, before it finds justification. You cannot transform what you refuse to acknowledge. Most people, however, do not want to see this part of themselves. They spend their lives polishing the mask of goodness while the shadow grows behind it. They mistake reputation for integrity, image for substance. But integrity has nothing to do with how you appear to others. It is how honestly you see yourself. The second safeguard is the courage to question your justifications. The mind will always find a reason to excuse its behavior. They deserved it, I had no choice. It's for the greater good. These are the whispers of self-deception. Each time you hear them, pause. Ask, am I protecting truth or protecting my image of myself? Because truth does not need protection. Only ego does. If you notice carefully, you will find that self-deception thrives in haste. When you rush, when you act under pressure, when you obey without reflection, you create the perfect conditions for blindness. That is why all awareness begins in stillness. When you stop reacting long enough to see clearly, life reveals its patterns. You begin to notice the subtle moment when kindness turns to pity, when conviction turns to arrogance, when belonging turns to obedience. You begin to sense how easily the good heart can harden when it feels threatened. Awareness does not prevent darkness from appearing, but it prevents you from confusing it with light. There is also another force, perhaps the most powerful of all, that protects the heart from corruption: empathy. Not the sentimental kind that we offer only to those we like, but the deeper empathy that recognizes itself in others. When you can feel another person's fear, confusion, or pain, you remember that they are not so different from you. it becomes difficult to harm what you can see yourself in. This is why systems that seek to control people always begin by reducing empathy. They divide, label, and dehumanize. They make the other seem distant or inferior, so that conscience no longer interferes with action. But awareness reverses this process. It brings the other close again. It reminds you that behind every face is the same trembling mystery that looks through your own eyes. When empathy returns, morality is no longer a set of rules. It becomes a natural response of the heart. You do not need commandments to stop you from cruelty when you can feel its echo within yourself. The third safeguard is moral courage. Awareness without courage can become passive. It can see clearly, but still choose comfort over truth. True awareness demands the willingness to act when silence would be easier. It asks you to lose what is safe in order to remain whole. This is not about grand heroism. It is about the quiet, ordinary moments when integrity costs you something. When you speak up though your voice shakes. When you refuse to join in cruelty, even when everyone else is laughing. When you admit your fault instead of defending your pride. Each time you do this, you reclaim a small part of your freedom. The strength to do this does not come from discipline or ideology. It comes from humility. You begin to see that you are not separate from those you judge. The same forces that corrupt others live in you as potential. The only difference is whether you are awake to them. This humility gives rise to compassion, not the weak kind that tolerates everything, but the wise kind that understands. When you understand why people fall, you no longer stand above them, you stand beside them. And from that position, you can help. You see, it is not the darkness that destroys the world. It is unconsciousness. The good person who stops noticing, the just person who stops reflecting, the kind person who stops questioning. Evil does not need hatred to thrive. It only needs forgetfulness. But when you see something remarkable happens, you begin to sense the fragile beauty of human nature. How easy it is to lose balance, and how miraculous it is that we ever find it. You start to forgive, not to excuse, but because you recognize yourself in every fall and every redemption. If you can hold this awareness, you will see that the line between good and evil is not a wall dividing people. It is a thread running through every heart. The task of life is not to stand on one side of it, but to walk it, awake. And when you walk that line consciously, you discover a secret. The light that keeps you from falling is not perfection. It is honesty. The willingness to look within and say, yes, I am capable of anything, but I choose awareness. So in the end, perhaps good and evil are not opposites at all. They are the two movements of a single dance, the contraction and expansion of consciousness itself. When you cling to one and reject the other, you lose your rhythm. When you see both as part of the same whole, you begin to move freely again. The one who understands this no longer fears his shadow. He can walk through the world without armor, because he has nothing left to defend. He knows that monsters are not born, they are forgotten selves. And when you remember who you truly are, when you see that even your darkness belongs to the light, the monster dissolves. Not because you conquered it, but because you finally turned to face it.